As an American, I have to say that America is a land of freedom. Unfortunately, has denied unalienable rights of life, liberty, and the pursuit of love to oppressed classes in its history, women, Negroes, and immigrants, without the added insult of being oppressed by highly centralized banking, and still does. Yet we overcame and thrived. Likewise, I want members to forgive and forget unjust remarks, from the picadillos of our enemies to the slander of drunk buffoons. Remember instead unjust and just acts with throat in the game, not cheap talk with expiration dates. Members unite and believe in the good spirit and deeds of Americans and buy Fat Tail Mag or donate. I want to remind members that the movement stands on principles that few for now, since they need to be examined thoroughly in an age where people change their minds faster than a newsflash. We stand for particular ideas long developed. For example, we're against GMOs, yet some will argue generate data, etc. But we have already demonstrated that GMOs are dangerous, hence we are against GMOs. If we get criticism, arguments back and forth, flattery, smear campaigns, etc., on our principles, members ought to welcome them, since that shows that the other side has nothing else to stand on, and even be intolerant of their charlatanism. A movement of invariable principles is more potent, since that keeps us united, since one of our ends is power. Just look around for fragile entities with more or less power over the oppressed classes. We want to empower the latter and revolutionize the former with our ideas. And remember, ideas like survival of the fittest do not survive because they are generally the best ones in a random environment, or even the rational ones, but because the persons that had them managed to survive. So take care, members, since we must stand on solid ground, since the key to our success and survival is that we never compromise. Now, I articulated the movement policy toward highly centralized banking, but I will insert a clause. Members have to publish or act against highly centralized banking to qualify act of omission, since highly centralized banking is fragile, as we saw in the '08 crisis, which I have seen very few doing it, and that defectors will be shamed. For some, the latter sounds harsh, but a rational policy uh, um, keeps vultures and imbeciles away that ought to study the ideology instead. I revise the policy every year in case I change my mind or the situation changes. I sometimes sound pessimistic or cynic like Diogenes and his dog looking for an honest man. But as the leader, I have to be prudent and erudite, and I have learned from John Gray, the philosopher. Remember, it is for your own good, since I want members to understand the theology first, have thought in the game, and act justly, especially among the youth, in order to survive. An ancient anecdote makes the point clear. A platoon of hoplite had sieged a castle, and one of them yelled to the castle keeper to let them in, since they were gods. The castle keeper replied, "If you are gods, come in and you will do us no harm. If you are men, come in and you will meet men." I feel privileged too to serve labor, since the heydays of labor, nobody has critiqued the system as I did on Fat Tail Mag Volume 1, Number 2. Again, heretofore, long live the movement and America. I want to reiterate to members and comrades to study the ideology and policy so you can understand the obstacles we face: extermination, misunderstanding, ostracization as non-bourgeoisie. Yet we live in a free society in which our message can be heard. Yet I lament that far too many will never get us, so to speak. Indeed, it's not that what we believe, say, love one another, that sets us apart from the rest, but how we act and are inclined justly towards others. Nevertheless, the movement is an organization with particular ends that are invariable, and if we change some minds along the way, then so be it. Yet I know the spirit of history is with us, and that highly centralized banking is fragile. Now, as for others, if you don't get us, then learn. If you fear us, then join us. Just don't act unjustly toward us who serve labor while you are apathetic. I created the ideology with some myth for flexibility on Facto Mag Volume 1, Number 2. Now, one of the best in history, after deep logical thought and having read some of the best thinkers in history and cited their arguments too. Yet note what other charlatans do. They play demagogues for pay, in which they hear what simple people think, mostly their nightmares, add simple arguments and cater to their fears. In spite of the obvious contradictions of the arguments, that's because they follow what blocks barely articulate and tell you what to do instead of what not to do. One of the best thinkers in years, and Taleb, who I recommend for ideas, mentioned that he is into crisis prevention, not heart surgery. Yet you hear of imbeciles who listen to other imbeciles, in which the poverty of their thoughts ends up in contradicting themselves, hence the worst kind of demagoguery, entertaining at best. The movement is prudent, pragmatic, and has a specific ideology and principles. Members remain united. As for others, please do not be deaf, dumb, and blind. Members have contempt for them, since we are on the right side of history, since highly centralized banking, being fragile, will inevitably fall. In order for the art movement to survive, we must be determined, disciplined, and with ability. The understanding of our ways may take many years. Second, if a leader makes a mistake, she ought to be criticized for it by members, not only making her a better leader, but to move her in the correct direction and to learn from the mistake too. The movement is a unit of vanguard of myth ideology. Next, we have classes that may or may not support us. Usually, this is due to class interests. Acquiescence with supporters and ignore the apathetic. Then we have the masses, in which some can support us and others are trash. Hence the movement, the classes, the masses. I've heard of past movements through sweat, blood, and tears, taking 20 years to gain any real power, but thanks to the interconnections and cooperation, which should use to its full advantage, I promise 10. Meanwhile, remain united and organized. Now for the leaders, I have discussed before on Buddha leader how when making big decisions, you ought to look at the consequences first. As for the probabilities, I suggest the 60-40 rule. If you are 60% correct in your projections and have looked at the consequences, then act on your decision. Now note that it doesn't mean you're guaranteed success or that you even computed the probabilities correctly in big decisions. But you have made a decision with heroism, courage, and skin in the game, and take the responsibilities of the consequences. Indeed, you may make a mistake, but you can learn from the mistake and become a better leader. Now there are millions of imbeciles and cowards on this earth, and who haven't read Buddha Leader on Facto Mag or know the precautionary principle when making decisions. Hence, leaders, it's up to you to lead them with courage. As for others, remember, gay guys, defectors will be shamed. Let's see. Members, do not be